Thank you, Tom. I'm glad you survived all of his shenanigans. Our next speaker is Dan Watson, and he goes way back with Gary. They met in the police academy, and we all became fast friends for many, many years.
Thanks, Sue. A couple of tough acts to follow. Jim, I'm really glad you could be here. It means a lot to all of us from LAPD.
Thank you very much.
And Tom, you stole some of my stories. Sue told me to keep it to 5 minutes. Any of you that know me know that's an impossible task. So anyway, as Sue mentioned, with the exception of the family, first I want to thank the Madonna Hand for providing name tags. You know, a lot of us have the same problem I do. You recognize faces but forget some of the names. So thank you, Madonna Hand. Other than the family, some of the family, I've probably known Gary longer than most anybody in the room. And we met at 6 o'clock in the morning on September 4th, 1973, when we both started the LA Police Academy. But we both had heard about each other before that. Gary's dad, who at the time was a detective on LAPD, he later retired as a lieutenant, and my father-in-law at the time both worked an off-duty job. My father-in-law worked for LA Water and Power. At the Times, LA Times, on Wednesday nights, stuffing papers into the big, thick Thursday issue. And Chuck, my father-in-law, says, "Hey, this guy I work with, he's a great guy. He's got a good son. You got to meet him. He's a really good guy." And apparently, Pat Brennan got kind of the same message to Gary. So we met literally that first day, and something clicked. And then our wives met, and it really clicked. Stevie, my first wife, and Sue became absolute best friends for many, many years, still are very close friends. I just got to say we're fortunate. My marriage ended, and that when that happens, it's often that only half the divorced couple get to keep their friends. We both did. Gary and Sue fully embraced Kathy, my replacement wife, and John, Stevie's replacement husband. They would. Stevie and John would be here, but Stevie's dealing with some health issues of her own, and can't travel.
Do on the way home, Dan. I'll explain it.
And we got a 700-mile drive. I got a lot of time to make. So, Gary, as was mentioned by Chief McDonald, had a legacy. I did too. It was interesting. My grandfather was on LAPD from 1911 to 1931. Besides Gary and his dad, Pat, Gary's brother, Kevin, I didn't know there was a cousin on there now. There also was Uncle Bill, who was Gary's great uncle, and I'm not quite sure the connection. And I met Uncle Bill in about 1990 at Kevin's graduation, and we got to visit with him, and Uncle Bill and my grandfather worked together in the 20s. That's how far back that relationship goes. And he told me a lot of stories, some of them I'd heard, and he just validated what I knew about my grandfather. We were in the academy together, as I said. There were 4 squads for marching and physical training. So they pick a squad leader and they're guys like Gary who had, a little bit of military experience and knew how to march, and, the rest of us knuckleheads didn't. So Gary was the first guy, and then everybody else in the squad was just randomly assigned to a squad, and we stood by height. Well, I was the tallest guy in our squad, which meant when we marched, I got to look over the top of Gary's head, and that was good. And then when we did our physical training on the field, we got to beat the crap out of each other. So you all know how big Gary was, and I'm a little bit bigger, and it all worked out well until we did some judo. And we had a PT instructor named Bob Jarvis, also known as Judo Jarvis, who thought he knew something about judo. So they had us do an exercise where one guy is behind the other his partner. He put his arm over his shoulder, and he would grab your wrist and throw you over. and you'd roll you onto the ground. Well, it was no problem. I would pick Gary up, and I'd throw him over, and he'd fall on the ground, and they taught us how to fall. I'd get behind Gary, and I'd bend over, and my feet were still on the ground. So the instructors and all of you guys who went through the academy, they don't have a lot of sense of humor. So when they'd walk by, what I had to do was lift my feet off the ground and then kind of fall off of his back, and we both got through. Anyway, as Jim mentioned, Chief McDonald, Gary graduated #1 in our class, which was no surprise. He was a star from the very first day of the academy for the next 34 years. As friends, we were sort of Mutt and Jeff, the odd couple. He was Felix Unger. I was Oscar Madison, for those of you that remember the show. He was the only guy I know that in uniform looked better than Daryl Gates. And that says a lot. I had a partner when I was a young officer who used to call me a duffel bag because he said I looked like 100 pounds of duffel in a 90-pound duffel bag. And as you can see, not much has changed. We were fortunate to work around each other quite a few times over our career. We always promoted at about the same time. We studied together. We out of the academy, he went to Newton, I went to Rampart, and we ended up at jail division. We got wheeled to the jail, for those of you who know what that means. Then we both ended up in Rampart. Never worked as partners, but worked around each other a lot. A few years later, we were both police officers 3, working the academy as squad advisors, and put a bunch of other recruits through the academy. Sam Barber was our boss. Sam is 85, 86 years old, living in Arizona, and our third partner was John Cooley, who is coincidentally in Texas right now visiting Sam and his son, who lives there. We later made sergeant. I replaced Gary at Rampart Vice, but we worked together for a month or two. And then after that, we both worked for Commander Jim Jones, who was here earlier with his wife Donna, and they had to leave, but they were at the service. And Gary, again, this is LAPD, people know these terms, Gary was Jones's adjutant, and I managed a grant program. So I had to write a lot of reports that had to be signed by the commander. So I'd go through Gary. And Gary was very meticulous, and he was a good editor. So I would send something up, and he would kick it back with chicken scratch all over it. I would make the changes. I would send it back a few days later. He'd make a bunch of more changes and basically put it back to what I sent him a week before, which really pissed him off. Anyway, Chief McDonald did a great job describing the respect Gary had on LAPD, and I can just echo it as a peer. He was more than a partner, he was also a mentor to me and many other people. He was a great leader, and anybody who ever worked with him respected him. People that didn't know him saw him from the distance and might have been a little bit intimidated because he was so stoic, but anybody who ever worked around Gary loved him and benefited from it and thought the world of him. So another part of my life with Gary is family. I mentioned that our wives became very good friends. I started my family a little bit before. My son Tom and daughter Melissa are here. Melissa and Michael are close to the same age. And we took family vacations together. We, in the early 80s, when we had no money, we bought a tiny little cabin in Big Bear. We couldn't afford it. Interest rate was 17%, for those of you that remember. I remember, so we refinanced it. We were thrilled to get a 12% loan a couple of years later. After 4 years, we got rid of it. We didn't want to have it anymore. So we sold it. We had an agreement what would happen if one couple wanted out. They ended up buying another place, and were nice enough to let us continue to come stay in their house that we no longer had to pay half of it. And Gary being Gary, it was what's called a livable shell, meaning it's built and completed enough that you can get a certificate of occupancy. So like drywall is on the wall, but it's not taped and it's not painted. You got plywood floors, you got a kitchen sink attached to the wall with no cabinets. So the idea is it's a way to get a house for a lot less money, and then you go up on the weekends and you do a little bit here, you do a little bit there. Well, what'd you have that, 20 some years? He never finished it. He'd go up there and he'd go up there and drink a little whiskey, smoke a cigar, and take a nap. So we did vacations together. I know Tom and Melissa would say their favorite vacation as kids is when we went to Lake Powell and rented a houseboat. And we had some great stories. Gary and I thought Sue was going to get us killed. She started a fight with some drunks, and I'll just leave it at that. She started it, and we had to convince her. The boys, this was great. The boys spent the week creating beauty. So Tom was maybe 14, Claire was maybe 9, and the idea was to take a set of youth skis, short water skis, attach a beach chair to it so that Claire could ride on the skis sitting in a beach chair. So Michael was the chief engineer, Gary was the inspector, and Claire was the guinea pig. And Tom was he was the construction guy. He laid things out. So every day they would put something together, and they'd get up, and it'd fall apart before they ever got up off the water. And the mothers were both scared to death that Claire was going to end up getting hurt. She never did. Finally, on like the second to last day, she got about a 30-second ride. And I mean, you think she won 100 meter in the Olympics. I mean, everybody was cheap, jumping and screaming and having a great time. And then the boys built a wrestling ring. We were, if you houseboated, you beach it, and there's a big sand area in front of us. So they spent an entire day building a wrestling ring. And we ended up, thank God the picture that Michael sent me of Gary and I literally with underwear on our head. And under our t-shirts, we did a tag team wrestling match, WWF or WWE, whatever it is real popular at the time. So Gary and I went and wrestled with Michael and Tom, and it was ugly. But we let them win. And make fools out of ourselves. We introduced the boys to hunting trips with Garrett Zeman, who would be here today, except he's on a cruise and is in the middle of the ocean somewhere. We went out in the middle of nowhere, and in fact, we were out there the night of the Northridge earthquake and slept through it because Gary and I were in a Jack Daniels blizzard. So I can just say, Gary and Sue, and they were just part of our family growing up, and Gary was like an uncle. As we go through life, some of us are fortunate enough to develop really close friends that are lifetime friends, and Gary was one of those for me. And I got more out of the deal than he did. He'd never say that, but I know he knows it. He introduced me to Irish whiskey. Kathy just wrote a story. We were at McClintock's on St. Patrick's Day one night, and he had just found out that a French firm had purchased Jameson's and several other Irish distilleries. And this is back when we were all mad at the French. So Gary saw it as an ethical dilemma. How can we drink French-owned Irish whiskey when we were mad at the French people? So he came up with a toast, and because there's young kids here, I'm not going to repeat the toast, but the initials are FTF, and you can probably figure it out. He introduced me to big game hunting in Colorado. He and Sam Barber told me stories. I finally was able to go and join them. Dick Bonneau was on the second trip. Art Miller joined us several times. And we had some wonderful experiences driving to outside of Grand Junction. And it had nothing to do with harvesting an animal. That's just an added bonus. It's being in the wild, watching the sunrise over the Colorado Rockies with good friends and fellowship that makes it a memorable experience. And I was able to introduce Tom, and actually introduced Art to the great activity of hunting, and we had some good times. Gary and I were both cigar smokers. I used to accuse him of being a cigar snob because he only smoked expensive cigars, and occasionally I would steal them from him. At work, he taught me how to be a better supervisor, how to supervise vice cops, how to be a better leader, taught me how to be a better husband, better father, and actually a better person. And I know I'm not the only person that feels the same way. As we got older, we kind of drifted apart to some extent. It was only natural. Gary and Sue moved to Rio Grande. Kathy and I moved to Arizona. And yet when we get on the phone or we would visit them every year or so, nothing had changed. We had a connection that was just always there. And we would visit Sue and Gary and go out in the garage and drink Irish whiskey, the four of us. Gary and I would smoke cigars, honest to God, until 2 in the morning sometimes, and solve all the world's problems. Anyway, if Gary was your friend, and I know half the room here, more than half, everybody here was Gary's friend, that's why you're here. When I got the word about Gary's crash, I was just struck. Like all of us, I was blindsided. You know, at our age, or at my age, and a whole lot of the people in here, we're used to, we've lost parents, we have friends that get sick, and we know we're going to lose them. We don't expect this to happen, especially not to somebody who, as Tom described, was so physically fit, and, you know, other than liking whiskey and cigars, he led a very healthy life. So some of you are familiar with the term dry January. People take the month of January off and don't drink to prove to themselves they can go for a month without drinking. Well, I take off February because it's got fewer days. Hey, think about it. So, and the first year I did it was last year, and I figured I wasn't going to penalize myself because it was a leap year, so I just went 28 days. But I violated that rule on the night that Gary passed. Kathy and I both had a splash, because a splash of Jameson's is what we would do. So, you know, we all, and everybody here felt the same way, but I can't comprehend the loss that it means to Sue, and Michael and Jen, and Claire and Joe, and Meade, and Eamon, and Genevieve. And, you know, you just need to know, we are all here to comfort you. We love you, we care for you. You know, Tom did a good job of describing Gary's feelings for his grandkids, and I was going to mention Pecos Bob, and I won't because you described it so well. I just remembered, I can't believe somebody wrote a book for his grandson, and they gave it to the school. I think it's in the school library. Anyway, I just, you know, Sue, I just want you to know, and you do know, how much Gary adored you and your kids and the grandkids, and how much not only you meant to him, but how much he fought for all of you. So, we love you.